watching ANN.
I am Olajumoke Olatunji. 6 persons were killed and scores injured in a renewed interstate boundary clash between the people of Igala in Benue State and Ohanku local government area of Ebonyi State. An eyewitness says several farm produce were destroyed and hundreds of persons had fled their homes. Both communities have been in dispute over a large parcel of farmland, and the crisis had lingered for a very long time. The situation got out of hand when youth from both communities escalated the crisis. Ebonyi State Deputy Governor Kelechi Igwe visited the scene of the incident and appealed for calm. The Senate has mandated its committees on petroleum, downstream and police affairs to probe the alleged role of security operatives in last Friday's pipeline explosion in Osisioma community in Abia State. 150 persons lost their lives in the explosion. Senator Theodore Orji from Abia State, who moved the motion in the Senate, also expressed concern over alleged NNPC inaction in the incident. Senator Orji also alleged that the police resorted to collecting money from villagers to scoop petrol in containers, a very dangerous thing to do. Meanwhile, the Senate has also condemned Nigerian banks for imposing excessive and illegal charges on customers and has asked the central bank to suspend the monthly automated teller machine card maintenance fees charged by banks. Also, a Senate panel grilled yesterday Professor Bolaji Owasonye, who was nominated as the chairman of the Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Commission. The Senate Committee on Anti-Corruption demanded to know what the nominee would bring to bear if confirmed as new ICPC chair. The All Progressives Congress National Appeal Committee has reaffirmed that Senator Shehu Sani remains the party's candidate for Kaduna Central Senatorial District in the 2019 general elections. The committee, headed by Professor Osahime Osumbo, gave the senator a clean bill of health, insisting that Sani is the only senatorial candidate from the zone that is duly recognized by the party. Some aspirants accused the party leadership of deliberately delaying the process to frustrate them and to cause their petition to be late. Minister of Finance Zainab Ahmed has directed the extension of the ongoing verification and payment of former workers of the defunct Nigeria Airways. Ahmed says the exercise would continue until everyone is captured. The exercise was initially built to last for 1 week. The minister gave the directive on Wednesday during an on-the-spot assessment visit to 3 exercise centers in Kano, Enugu and Lagos. The federal government took a major step on Wednesday towards stopping in-season strike actions by labor unions. It has decided to impose the no work, no pay rule. Briefing journalists at the end of the weekly Federal Executive Council meeting in Abuja, Minister of Labour, Employment and Productivity, Dr. Chris Ngige, gave the decision was in compliance with Section 43 of the Labour Act, which he said was earlier upheld by the National Industrial Court. Ngige says the rule means whenever workers are on strike, they're not entitled to salaries as long as industrial action lasts. But organized labor says the threat by the federal government to activate the no work, no pay principle will be a negation of workers' rights of association. Ekiti State Governor Kayode Fayemi has stopped the education tax in all primary and secondary schools with immediate effect. The tax was introduced by his predecessor, former Governor Ayodele Fayose. Fayemi also says education will be free from now on in all public primary and secondary schools across the state. Former Governor Fayose introduced payment of education tax in 2015 in all private and public schools across the state. Children at those state schools are mandated to pay 500 naira and 1,000 naira per term, respectively. And still speaking of former Governor Fayose, the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission has obtained a remand order from the Federal Capital Territory High Court to keep him for 2 weeks. The FCC says the remand order is subject to renewal, which implies that Fayose could be released earlier or later than 2 weeks, depending on the outcome of its investigation. Fayose is being probed for alleged corruption in the build-up to the 2014 elections. He's accused of receiving kickbacks from government contractors through his aide, Abiodun Agbele, who is currently standing trial for fraud. Delta State former Governor James Ebonyi on Wednesday lost an appeal against his conviction in London, where he was jailed for laundering public funds through British banks and properties. Ebonyi had pleaded guilty in a London court in 2012 to 10 counts of fraud and money laundering involving at least £50 million. He received a 13-year jail term, half of which is served. He is now back in Nigeria. Ebonyi appealed based on allegation that British police and prosecutors had been involved in activities that tainted the judicial process. Now he is threatening to drag the UK to the Court of Appeal at the European Court of Human Rights, challenging Wednesday's ruling that upheld his conviction. A federal high court in Abuja has consolidated 2 suits filed by Uche Nwosu and Senator Hope Uzodinma in the dispute arising from the Imo State All Progressives Congress governorship election primary. It declined to substitute Nwosu's name as pleaded by Uzodinma. Nwosu won the primary conducted by APC-approved panel, while Uzodinma was proclaimed winner of the primary conducted by a faction. Justice Othman Musa has adjourned the case to later this month. Coming up, 6 Tanzania school children killed in lightning strike. Stay with us.
Are you sure you want to do this?
Adam, go and bring us your husband. Okay, hello baby.
We're in this together, okay? Can you hear me? Keep coming forward.
Wait, stop.
You okay, lean to your right. Keep walking down. Keep walking to the left. Yes.
You're almost here.
Keep going.
You are here. Wow, you did it.
I'm just so glad I didn't have to use my cane to do this.
And I am so glad no other man got you before me. Let me be your eyes.
We will never stop working to give you a network you can rely on so you can enjoy life's special moments. MTN, everywhere you go.
You are watching ANN. There is a new all-news network on the scene in Nigeria to give news from a purely news perspective and to promote free information flow across Africa. Fresh views, unbiased, bold, with a purely African view. African News Network, ANN, in a truly African spirit.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. Now to African stories. Lightning struck at a primary school in northern Tanzania on Wednesday. At least 6 children were killed and 25 injured. A local government official says the lightning hit the school during the morning hours in the mountainous Gator region. Images circulating on Tanzanian social media showed parents crowding in front of a hospital near the school for news about their children. 4 school pupils and their teacher had died in eastern Tanzania's Kigoma region, where their classroom was struck by lightning 3 years ago. The Tunisian Interior Ministry says flash flooding has killed at least 2 persons, including a 6-year-old child on Wednesday in the central region of the country. The drownings came in just under a month after torrential rains killed at least 5 people in the northwestern region of Cap Bon. A child died in the Sidi Bouzid region, while a 40-year-old man drowned in a flooded wadi in the neighboring province of Kazarin. Schools across central Tunisia were closed for the day, and the flooding has forced the closure of many roads, particularly in Kazarin. Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni has officially launched a 525-meter-long bridge in the southern town of Jinja, dubbed the new source of the Nile Bridge. The cable-stayed bridge was funded by a $112 million loan from the Japanese International Cooperation Agency. It is the second of its kind in East Africa after Tanzania's 680-meter-long Kimbaboni Bridge. The Director of Roads and Bridges at Uganda National Roads Authority, Samuel Muzuni, says one of the aims of constructing the iconic signature bridge was enhancing tourism. The bridge is expected to have a lifespan of 120 years. The African Union has called for an urgent resumption of peace talks in Comoros, where a political crisis has turned violent. The crisis began with July's constitutional referendum, which ended the rotation of the presidency between the three main islands of the Comoros, enabling the incumbent Azali Assoumani to extend his term limit. The AU said it deplores the breakdown of talks between rival parties earlier this month. It says there was an urgent need for confidence-building measures to facilitate the resolution of the crisis there. At least 2 persons were reported to have been killed during clashes between security forces and armed opposition protesters on the island of Anjan. AU Commission Chairman Mustafaki Mohata called on politicians to put the interests of the country above all other considerations. The opposition boycotted the vote, which they saw as an illegal power grab by President Azali Assoumani, who can now run for office again. Zimbabwe is still forging ahead with its charm offensive to attract investment and seek more opportunities for economic development. But it appears there is still a long way to go to reach that goal. The Zimbabwean embassy in South Africa held a meeting recently with the Guantan Growth and Development Agency in Johannesburg to discuss current economic climate in Zimbabwe and trade relations with its southern African neighbors. But the volatile situation now in Zimbabwe, including the threat of nationwide strikes and long queues for food and fuel, might have an adverse effect on its quest for economic development. Now Zimbabwe, which is on a slow economic turnaround, presents both risks and opportunities for investors. It may take a little longer for investors to get returns from their investments in Zimbabwe. The government is also taking some measures to attract more investment, but it still needs more time to create a more enticing environment. Data have showed this week the riots in South Africa linked to public hunger over poor government services and poverty have hit a record high this year. One analyst wants the ruling African National Congress should not ignore this sign ahead of next year's election. The riots typically see protesters blocking roads with burning debris, hurling rocks and bricks, and clashing with the police. They are demanding for housing, running water, paved roads, and other amenities decades after the end of apartheid. President Cyril Ramaphosa has pledged to improve governance and kickstart an economy mired in recession. But high levels of public discontent reflect the challenge the ANC faces as it tries to reform the country's economy. The riots were spread between areas governed both by the ANC and the opposition. When we return, international stories, 19 persons die in Crimea college shooting. Stay with us.
Super out. MTN gives 2,000% bonus for reactivating your MTN SIM. That's right. If you haven't used your MTN SIM for 45 days or more, recharge now and get 2,000% bonus. That's right, 2,000% bonus for your first recharge of every month.
Shining our eyes on breaking news, whether in the east or in the west, with Al-Shabaab in Somalia and Boko Haram in Nigeria, with turbulence in the north and agitation in the south. Wherever you live in Nigeria, wherever news happens in Africa, we've got it covered. ANN News, connecting Africans in a truly African spirit.
Welcome back. This is NN News. On the foreign scene, at least 19 people were killed and dozens injured at a college in the Black Sea region of Crimea on Wednesday when a student went through the building shooting at fellow pupils. 18-year-old teenager turned up at the college in the city of Kerch on Wednesday afternoon carrying a firearm and then began shooting. His body was later found in the college with what investigators described as self-inflicted gunshot wounds. 3 persons, including a newborn, have died in Venezuela after hours-long power outage in 16 states left hospitals with no electricity. This has become a persistent problem in what is already a struggling nation. An electric transformer explosion in Venezuela's interior left most of the country in darkness for days, limiting the ability of health professionals to care for patients. Hospital services were also hampered by a lack of medical supplies and medicine to treat patients. Malaysia's anti-graft agency said on Thursday it has detained former Deputy Prime Minister Ahmed Zahid Hamidi in a case linked to misappropriation of funds in the welfare group. This detention is part of the anti-graft agency's probe of alleged abuse of power, criminal breach of trust and money laundering at a welfare group. Zahid will appear in court on Friday. The ongoing European Union summit will be a key to pushing forward the Brexit negotiations. Already, EU members say there is nothing new in UK Prime Minister Theresa May's presentation, which was expected to introduce the progress of Brexit negotiations to 27 EU heads of state and government. Those 27 leaders will assess if the Brexit negotiations have made real progress and decide if a further special summit could be held in November to complete terms for a political declaration on a future EU-UK trading relationship. Britain remains deeply divided over Brexit, and the British public was genuinely uncertain about what lies ahead.
We don't know what's going to happen. One day they say that, one day they say that, and we don't know where we're going.
I know about Brexit, but it's so confusing. Nobody knows what's going on. Can somebody tell me or explain Brexit to me?
May told the British Parliament on Monday afternoon that real progress has been made on the vast majority of Brexit issues between the EU and the UK. The so-called Irish backstop proves to be the toughest aspect of Britain's EU withdrawal deal. The issue of the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, which will become the UK's border with the EU, is one of the last remaining obstacles to achieving a diverse deal with Brussels. The International Day for the Eradication of Poverty was observed at the United Nations headquarters on Wednesday, during which Secretary General Antonio Guterres delivered a speech on the significance of poverty alleviation efforts. More than 200 UN officials and representatives from international organizations attended the event and called for actions to alleviate poverty worldwide. In the speech, Guterres said 10% of the world's population remains in extreme poverty and that more than 700 million people are unable to meet their basic daily needs. He said countries need policies that dismantle barriers that contribute to the perpetuation of poverty. The International Day for the Eradication of Poverty has been observed every year since 1993 to promote awareness about the need to eradicate poverty and destitution in all countries. Ondo Sunshine Starts Shining No More has been disbanded for poor performance. Stay with us.
You are watching ANN.
If you know fit go internet or follow for Twitter, you know fit snap photo send or get it photo send. Now because you dey use Palasa, your phone no dey answer. See me see wahala. My brother, go get smartphone, yeah. Drop that Palasa phone. Phone wey no go for your hand, yeah. Drop that Palasa phone. Phone wey no fit take selfie. Drop that Palasa phone. No be correct phone, yeah. Drop that Palasa phone.
Upgrade to a smartphone today and get double data for 6 months on any MTN data bundle you buy. Simply purchase a smartphone from any store, anywhere in Nigeria, or bring your current smartphone from any network. Insert your MTN SIM card to start enjoying your double data bonus. Offer is open to all new and existing MTN subscribers. Join the largest smartphone movement today.
Make it not for your hand. That's Malasa phone.
Welcome back. This is NN News. In sport, Ondo State government has ordered the dissolution of its football club, Sunshine Stars. A statement signed by the state's Commissioner for Youth Development and Sport, Saka Yusuf Ogunleye, cited recent poor performance of the club as reason for the dissolution. The club finished 18th in the Nigerian Professional Football League last season. Football Kenya Federation has announced the Harambee Starlet has replaced Equatorial Guinea at the 2018 Women's African Cup of Nations. Two-time winners Equatorial Guinea beat Kenya 3-2 on aggregate in the final round of qualifying before the Kenyans protested over the eligibility of 6 players. The disciplinary board upheld Kenya's protest and imposed a $10,000 on Equatorial Guinea FA. The team is disqualified from the African Women's Cup of Nations for this year. That is NN News this evening. Thank you for joining us. For details on this and other stories, visit our website, nnafrica.net. Conversation continues on our social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at NN Africa TV. I am Olajumoke Olatunji. Have a pleasant evening.